And
Uh, Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Chakra Meditation Podcast. I'm Roseanne, and today I have I always say it's a very special, but this is a very special guest because today I'm talking to Sarah Fyson, and Sarah I met when we were both on a really beautiful, magnificent retreat earlier this year. And yeah, I was really excited to get Sarah on the podcast to talk about the work that she does because it is, I think, fascinating and very aligned. So we're going to talk. Well, Sarah is a yoga teacher and a somatics practitioner. And so really I think the really interesting thing that we're going to discuss today is the somatics, is music, movement, body, and how we use that to heal ourselves, I guess. So welcome, Sarah. Thank you for joining me today.
thank you. It's so nice to be here and see you again.
I know, it is so good to see you.
Yeah.
So tell me this beautiful work you do. So Sarah's website is called Moments of Flow, and it's a beautiful site. But I was very I've been gazing at it for a few days now, going, oh, it'd be just lovely to go and join you because you do events, you do silent discos, you do yoga classes, you do healing work, you do all kinds of really interesting things. So tell me how this all came about. How did you get into somatics as a practice?
So movement has always been a huge part of my life ever since I was really young. So I started doing ballet at the age of 3 and then just made up lots of dances with my best friend, jumping out from behind curtains and singing. And that really was the beginning of something, because I ended up um, going to university and doing visual and performing arts. And around that time, my mum, who'd struggled with her mental health, it prompted me to really look inward and really discover how I could resource myself. And I've had a kind of lifelong quest really since that point about how my body can serve me and help me feel good, and yeah, how I can mother myself, how I can be the best I can be. So, um, yeah, that inquiry started really early for me. Um, and years later, after a dancing injury, I started yoga in 2004. And then eventually um, I did my teaching qualification. And it's been an organic process. I've always moved. I've taught drama. I've always been working with the body and been interested in how the body and mind work. Yoga was a sort of natural progression for me a bit later in life, but I've always worked in that manner. And then that actually brought around something different for me. I think I went in there being a bit naive, thinking I'm good at movement, I can do this. And then the practice of yoga, which is ancient, and yeah, just brought on a new depth of understanding about how to move my ego out of the way. And
Yeah, yoga is good like that. And I think that a lot of people, myself included, they start doing yoga because that, oh, that feels really nice, or oh, I can do it, or somebody's told me I should. And and you go along with it, and suddenly this kind of creeping realization that actually there's deeper stuff at work here. You may just be doing Trikonasana, but actually it's shifting your whole soul in some kind of way. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I can remember being in one of the first trainings when our teachers said, choose a pose that you like and get into it. And I whacked out a dancer pose because I could. And in the middle of that moment, I felt kind of ashamed. I had this right moment of shame when I was like, what am I trying to prove? This isn't about me looking good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that was a quite a big moment for me.
It's an
Um,
interesting thing, isn't it, that a lot of yoga in the West has become quite performative. And
yeah,
there's a phase, and it's less so now. Maybe it's just less in my feed because I don't engage with it. But it used to be, you'd get pictures of some incredibly flexible, circus performer almost doing some crazy backbend in the middle of a road or in snow or something. And it was performative. And it really puts other, normal people off doing yoga. And it's just like everybody should be able to do yoga, can do yoga.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's, a big part of my work is, how I can stay grounded, how I can resource myself so I can best hold space and be there for everybody and be inclusive. And a that's such a huge part of what we do. So I work with my husband, and more recently, because we met doing visual and performing arts and have a massive background in music, we met in the 90s in Brighton. And we both still work musically. We have started creating events where we use headphones, so they're completely immersive, so people can really get into the experience. We create beautiful soundtracks, which are mixtures of songs that we love from different genres and music that Jules makes, that we work on together, and we take people on a journey. And I think my job, if I was to really think about it, is to be an uplifter, to help people find the joy, be in their bodies, and help them find their joy and inspiration. So we take them on this beautiful journey, and in the middle of the experience of the event, we'll have a little dance together, and then we gently bring the energy back down. And at the moment, we've been finishing with a visualization, which might be a chakra visualization or something that's themed or something I've been interested in at the time. And these events we've been doing a lot of outside because nature's such a big healer. So we've got a collaboration on Clevedon Pier, right on the end of the pier, where we're surrounded by the sea, which is really elemental. We do one down at a community farm in Chew Valley near Bristol, south of Bristol in Somerset, near a lake. And I've just started a collaboration with this beautiful hotel in Shepton Mallet called Charlton House, where we're going to do it in their garden. So yeah, and there's some beautiful, expansive indoor places in Bristol. Yeah. Oh, and we're going to be doing one at Silver Sky Festival.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, so that's a new, after learning about the festival, since being on our weekend, I approached
Yeah.
Melissa, and we're going to do one there. I'm not quite sure which day, but Friday or Saturday as well.
Ah,
So
me. Yeah. That's something to look forward to for me personally, because I'm really hoping to get to Silver Sky. And
great.
that is in the UK. Now I know that many of my listeners are not in the UK and are in America and Australia and Canada and Germany and all sorts of places. And so what I want to get into is how we can all use our bodies to heal. So this somatic work, I like you and I, we know that movement, yoga, dancing, whatever, shifts something deep within us. So
Mm,
where does I mean, for you, it feels like this has always been in your DNA. Like
yeah.
this is like in your soul. This is your
Mhm.
spirit guidance. Your higher self knows that this is your work. But for other people who are just, wanting to find a different way of shifting energy, of
Mm.
breaking through, what kind of practices do you offer, and what can people do? What do you recommend?
Yeah, so that's a brilliant question, because I don't always take my own medicine. I, like everybody else, get stuck in my own brain, and
Yeah.
I have in the past had periods where I've been stuck in my sympathetic nervous system through uh, things that have been going on in my life at that time. And yeah, so one of the things that I do on a Friday, not every Friday, but quite most Fridays, is on Instagram. I'll do a live where I do a little kitchen disco, or I'd quite like to, I've been trying to take it elsewhere. So if I'm somewhere else, I'll do it somewhere else. So
Yeah.
I'll choose a really nice song, something that makes me feel good. And then I'll do a little introduction, and then just get people to dance wherever they are. So if they're in their workplace, they can get up from their desks. And just the invitation is for people to move and just have a little dance, 4 or 5, the songs are usually between 3 and 5 minutes, just one song. And just
Mm.
that practice of remembering to move, because I think even for me, I tell myself, I know that's what's good for me. So at the weekend, I was feeling a bit stuck. I was thinking about the events and work I had coming up. And my tendency would sometimes be, oh, well, I haven't got time to dance for 5 minutes. I need to go and do this. But it's rubbish. It's so
Yes.
rubbish. So I put my earpods in. It
Right.
was 6 in the morning. I took myself out in the garden, got my feet on the grass, and had a little dance. And as soon as I did, I could feel myself drop into my body. And I
Mm.
felt good listening to music. For me, it's a really big catalyst to shift me out of my brain and to get me out of the funk. Um, so that's one thing I do on a Friday. It's on a free little kitchen disco on Instagram.
Yeah, I love that. And as you were saying that, it's really clear that all of this work that you do, for me, when I look at it, it's like really clear that it's all sacral chakra, it's throat chakra, and it's this sense of creativity. At the sacral, everything is wanting to move. It's that hips, it's that emotions, it's that flow, it's that connection with the body, which is so important. And then the expression of it, the creativity of it
Yeah,
through the voice as well. And these two chakras are really linked. I've done a couple of meditations on how deeply linked they are and how important they are to us being able to find our flow. And that's one of the things that I think when, you think about when you're at your happiest or when you feel most yourself, when you feel authentically you, is when you are doing something in flow, when you
yeah,
feel like you've got that, just kind of, it's easy, time disappears, you just are. And
mm,
dance is one, and music are definitely. And I prescribe this for people who have blocked or stuck sacral chakras. I'm like, have a dance, shift your
yeah,
hips,
for
make like
sure,
Shakira and go for it,
for
So
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I,
And sometimes I think, because even for myself, I can get stuck in my head and forget to do that. And a few days, if I don't move for 2 or 3 days is enough, even for a day is enough to get me stuck. So I think another really important aspect is community
Mhm.
and having support, which is why I started the Fridays live kitchen disco, why we started our events to get people together. Um, and yeah, just I think having that support can be just hugely beneficial. And I've been working on my new business now, and being a lot on my own has been a challenge and gold, really, because it's really got me to use my practices. I used to teach a couple of days a week. I'd teach drama for the hospital service in Bristol as well. So I'd have that um, routine in my week. But when I took that away, it's been, I've had to really be disciplined about doing my own practice and seeking out friends for support and yeah, just moving really.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I'm the same, it's just me and my laptop just plugging away, trying
Yeah.
to trying to make things happen. And actually, the thing that really nurtures me is doing this, is that, talking to
Yeah.
people who are on the same journey as me, who are like-minded. And that community part of it is just so important and heartwarming and heart expanding. And it makes you realize that you're, well, firstly, you're not alone. You're not, an idiot for trying to do what you're doing, but you are doing good work that is meaningful and it helps people.
Yeah.
That's why I love it when I get comments from on the podcast. Usually it's on the meditations, but when I know that it's touching people, I'm like, oh yes, thank goodness.
Yeah, it's really great to get feedback. I mean, there's times when I've gone, "What am I doing?" I'm in
Mm.
my head doing something thinking, "Is anyone gonna like this event? What am I creating here? I'm creating something from nothing. It's coming from me." And I'm
Yeah,
thinking, "What am I doing?" Sometimes I feel like I'm going slightly mad. But then
but
you
this,
get somebody who reports back at the end of event. Somebody said to me they just felt like, I'd help them access their body, and they'd work through grief and found themselves involuntary crying at the end of an event that was such a release for them. And it just, those moments make it worth it.
Yeah.
Or a little comment on Instagram after a live saying, God, I really needed that. You know, you then go, oh, okay, this is what people need. We need connection.
Yeah.
Um,
Because
yeah.
we hold stuff within our bodies. We hold so much, we all know we hold tension, but we hold our emotions and we stuff things down. And we stuff that, when we repress our emotions, where do they get stuffed? All the way down into the hips, into the sacral, usually. And they can go anywhere, ping pong around the body, and but this movement aspect. So what do you think it is? I mean, the science of it, I find really interesting, that the vibration of, let's say, because you've just mentioned it, grief, which is a deep
Yeah.
wound in the hearts and the whole, but we can close over it, we can lock it away so we can
Mm,
be,
mm.
I guess, the somatic work. Where did you, apart from like acting school, dancing school, ballet, and all of the yoga, have you
Mm.
done any kind of formal like somatic training?
Yeah, I did. There's a wonderful teacher called Linda Ty, and she's part of an education system called Collectively Rooted, which she runs with Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Holds the Score. And she runs these amazing, really accessible, short series of workshops, courses. Um, and I did one with her, which was somatic regulation strategies, which looked at how we hold charge, or how we don't release charge. I mean, this is it in its really simplistic form, and I am no expert at all, but it was great because it gave me lots of take home practical things that I could take to my clients. So, how, for example, animals in the wild, when they get a shock, they shake the charge. They literally move it out of their body. And they showed us videos of a rabbit that had just been held in a fox's mouth that was playing dead. Then it was left alone. And you think it's going to be really traumatized, but it just waits until it's safe. And then it starts to shake. It shakes all this charge out of its body, and then it hops off and moves on, and it's absolutely fine. She showed another video with a polar bear that had been sedated by people so they could tag it, so they could follow it. And then they had the team around them with the camera filming the polar bear as it came round, and it did the same thing. It was shaking all of this shock out of its body. It really stuck with me, that. So that, that's a simple, very simplistic, but effective way of showing how wild animals are able to work through their trauma, and that us as humans, we get locked in, we don't move, we think, we hold everything, we hold all of these tensions in our body, and often it's just moving can really help shift stuff.
Yeah,
So yeah,
it,
Linda Ty, she's amazing.
because I think like if you have like a serious shock, like in a car crash or something really horrific,
Yeah.
that you come out, they'll wrap you in a blanket, but more, quite often the body will begin to shake from shock
Mm.
naturally. And you'll be like, oh no, I'm shaking, this is horrible. But actually, it's the body's most natural thing. And I wonder whether we suppress that, whether that's something that we used to do when we were, I mean, I'm sure, all the sort of chimps and monkeys and, all animals in the wild do this. We are animals, let's not
Mm.
forget, but we've thought our way into such a ways of being appropriate, ways of behaving, and just sort of shaking it out isn't something that we accept as.
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, there are so many cultures that would do that. Over here in the West, with mental health, we tend to pathologize it, give a lot of medication, where we go somewhere else and they'd be working it through with a shaman, they'd be moving stuff around.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and I think the other thing I was just thinking about when you were talking is how you know, I'm going to lose my train of thought here, but how there are so many different things that happen to us that we then store in the body, or because that's right. So we stored it from when we're younger, from when we have a memory. And then what happens is we then recreate that. And it's not necessarily the same scenario. So say you were, I don't know, let's take something like you were pushed and shoved or bullied in a group of people at school, in primary school. And then when you're in big groups of people, your body goes into the same reactive mode when actually the threat isn't really there. So, there's things for us that we can work through the body so that we're not recreating stress responses, which aren't, we create them. Our body recognizes something. And then even if it's not a real threat, we respond in a threat manner. So there's
Yeah.
so many little things we can do around that to help us.
So if somebody came to you with like deep, like long-term chronic anxiety, and they were feeling like, because this is an issue that I that I find a lot with a lot of my clients and there's such a common thing is people have this kind of overarching sense of anxiety. And there's a lot to feel anxious about in the world, but we need to be able to manage that. And there's I mean, for me, I go at it three ways, mind, body, and spirit. You've got to kind of do it all. You've got to understand where that's come from. Um, you know, find calm, find the inner peace, connection, spirit, whatever. But then the body part of it is like the really important aspect for me in terms of, a yoga practice. That's where I would go to. But, in terms of like your somatics, where would you take that for people who suffer with anxiety and related issues? Is it a person by person, this is what you in this space need, or
Yeah, I would say I would get to know people. I'm not a therapist, just to be clear, but what I do think I do well at is really getting on somebody's level and then starting to appeal to their higher self, and just not going into what that necessarily what it was that caused it, but getting them to move stuff. Because often I think by moving the body and by connecting and being in things, and they start to move and don't necessarily have to think, oh, that's why this was. I mean, I thought a lot about that myself, but then I've realized over time that actually I just need to move stuff out sometimes and not think about it too much.
so just as
The
you were speaking.
joy and yeah.
Yeah, what I'm thinking about is like it's almost kind of absurd having a conversation about movement.
Yeah, yeah, I know it's ironic, right? I was
Yeah.
writing an essay recently for I just finished my advanced yoga teacher training, and I'm just finishing an essay called Beyond Intellect, how yoga and other practices can help us find flow. So flow, I've been fascinated about it since I was about 20, and finding all the ways we can get into it. But as I wrote at the beginning paragraph, I was like, this is ironic. I'm writing about going beyond the intellect, and I'm in my intellect.
Yeah,
So,
having to be in my intellect in this moment. Yeah. So, well, let's talk about that because that is something that I think is a really big word, flow, and it can mean so much. What does it mean to you?
my first experience of really knowing what flow was when I was in my 20s, and I was at the Oxford School of Drama doing my postgrad in acting. And it was the first term, and the first term was all centered on Shakespeare. So we were doing monologues, and I was playing. I think for this one, I was playing Gertrude from Hamlet, I think. Um, Yes, I was. I definitely was, because I was talking about when she comes in to say that Ophelia has been drowned, and found dead. And I'd worked on it, and another big reason as to why I do this work is because I really suffered with my nerves. I would either be completely in them and they would paralyze me, or I would be using them and I'd be in flow. And because I'd had this experience quite early on when I was training about how to be in flow, but I didn't know how to keep it, I got obsessed. So this particular moment, I'd been practicing. I knew I was feeling pretty centered. I was on my own in my room the night before, and I'd worked out where I'd placed the people in the scene. And I came into the studio, and I started to do the monologue, and it was basically time slowed down. Everything went into alignment. I didn't really, it felt good, but I didn't know how to recreate this moment. And I just felt really connected to my emotions. They weren't over-egged at all. They were just in the moment. And when I came to, the principal just popped his hand on my shoulder, and he turned to the rest of the class and he went, "Now, who was moved by that?" And that's all he said. And I knew that that was something I'd not felt before. So I kind of felt like a complete fraud when I wasn't in that moment from then on. And I had moments when my nerves just got the better of me, and nobody there to tell me what that was or how to keep it. I didn't know anything about somatics. This was in, it was about 2001 when this happened. So that was my first experience of being completely in flow when time slows down. Everything's aligned. You're just speaking. You don't even know really what you're saying. But I did, because I'd learned it. If I hadn't learned it, I'd have been in my head.
Mm.
So that was another thing as an actor. You need to know your lines absolutely inside out. Otherwise, when you start to forget them, you're flicked into the intellect. So yeah, I had that experience, and then have been trying to attain it ever since, Roseanne. Like a lifelong quest. And when I'm not in it, I feel like a complete utter fraud
Why would you
in
feel like
terms
a
of my acting
fraud?
career.
I mean, it's a weird one. But you don't act anymore? You don't do any acting at the moment?
Well, I still got my agent, and he very occasionally, they're in London, occasionally they'll put me up for something down here. So I went up for what was Stephen Merchant did a series, The
Oh,
Outlaws.
God, that was good. Yes, that was
It was
brilliant.
good. So, but and ironically, the part I went up for was there's a comedian who lives down the road called Jade, and she got the part I went up for. But she's great. So I was like, oh well, yeah, she got it. It's good. But yeah, I don't do very much. I love it. My daughter's studying, so I get to help her.
Mm.
But I use it. I mean, I use it all the time. I use it in my delivery. I say that I use it all the time. At the end of my yoga classes, I do sound, I might sing. I use it in my delivery. Yeah. And I'm a trained Meisner practitioner, which is all about putting your attention fully on another person. So I use that all the time, and I teach that, in my work to help people get out of their heads so they can really come out into their full self-expression without worrying about what their brain thinks. So,
Okay. So I
so
don't
that's
know what this I have not aware of what this Meisner
Meisner.
practice.
It's an acting technique, which is
Okay.
probably for another podcast,
Another
maybe.
podcast.
But it's
Okay.
it's if anyone's interested, do look it up. I mean, anyone, yeah, you can look it up. It's a wonderful technique.
So you had experienced this moment of absolute pure flow where you were absolutely in yourself, and you've been chasing it ever since, which I get.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's moments in life where we do find that flow, and with any luck, people find that, either in the work that they do, it's usually to do with something creative. I would say that the easiest way to find flow is when you are doing something creative. So dancing, singing, right,
Yeah.
writing, drawing, creating, creating visual arts at some point. For me, I found that flow in when I started doing pottery, when I was creating,
Yeah,
throwing pots on the wheel. Like I could do that for hours and hours, and then
brilliant.
and I really pursued that. But then I started being Mrs. Judgmental in my head. I'm like, oh, that's not good
Yeah,
enough, or I should be able to do better than, or bigger, or more fancy, or whatever, and I kind of lost that flow. And I know that when I go to my pottery class, that I sometimes I'm like, yeah, today's the day that I'm gonna just be able to sit at the wheel and create something, and I don't know what it's going to be, but I will, it will be nice to do it, and it will feel good. And other days when I'm like, right, I need to do this because somebody's asked me to make them or whatever. And it'll just go completely wrong. And I'll just have a whole big load of mess of, wonky pots that have fallen over on the side. And yeah, it's all about when you get into your head that you don't find that. But that is the place that I think we are all looking for. And I think
yeah,
actually the I think you've got it nailed. And I think that the easiest way to get there, if you can get out of your head and not be subconscious, is dancing to music.
yeah, and that's, and for me, finding flow through dance is my easiest access.
Mm.
I've always moved, and when I had that moment at drama school, it was like the marrying of speaking my voice and finding my power and my authentic voice, and the courage to marry that up with my body, just to have
Yeah,
them working symbiotically was so amazing, because I was always quite shy. I didn't, I was a good girl. I was brought up Catholic. I had to, I was, didn't
yeah,
always find it easy to say actually what I thought.
yeah.
So the marrying up of my voice and my body was huge.
This
But yeah, dance is a very easy access point for me.
I think you've struck another very important point, which is that we have all this authenticity, we have our truth, we have our expression, we have our feelings and whatever going on within us. But do we actually express it? Do we actually voice it?
Mm,
Do we have the courage? Do we feel worthy? Do we have the skill of communicating our truth without, creating a place which makes us feel unsafe, or not accepted, or whatever? Like these are all things that hold us back from
yeah,
expressing truth. So when you say
absolutely.
you work with the voice as well, um, is that singing, voice sounding? What is your voice work? Tell me about that.
So in terms of leading other people, I do workshops. So recently I worked with about 40 people in a choir who were wanting to find their authentic expression when singing. So to be able to say the words, you know, coming from their heart, being real, and truthful. So I did a Meisner workshop for them, and in that we looked at how to put our attention fully on someone else. So again, we're not in the intellect when we're speaking, but it then you start to come from the heart and get more practiced at being able to come out of we've got so many barriers, or so many social, when we're young, don't, you've got to be good, you shouldn't speak here. We have all of these things that we put on ourselves or are
Oh,
put on
yeah,
us that
yeah.
prevent us from feeling like we can speak our truth, because we're trying to be the good girl or the good boy, or we're being the rebel and going against that, and then we're going down another, we're going against our truthful way by being more outspoken, or we're trying to be funny because we don't want to be bullied, or there are so many things that are put on us through society, that in this technique we start to it's a really organic process. You can't push it, but we start to just take the lid off the impulses that are underneath that want to come out, and you start to soften like the top layer, so that as we go through the exercises, that softens, and then that kind of spark of flow of pure us can start to emerge in the exercises, and it comes out, and you have these. It's like when you go to the theatre and you see you can go and see a play and there'll be one moment that is a standout moment. It might not even be through speaking, but there'll be a moment of pure connection that just lights up the room. And just for that moment, it's been worth going. And it's those spontaneity driven connection between two people through voice or moments or whatever that they're just so beautiful and so rich, and it's why we want to be on the planet, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in answer to your question, I do that sort of work for people in finding their authentic voice. And in terms of using my own voice, I mean, I chant every day anyway for about 5 minutes in the morning. So I clear my voice, as a discipline and as a prayer, really, for myself in the morning. I do that. But then I use my voice at the end of my in-person yoga classes when I'm leading a visualization. It might go into a bit of humming or chanting or something, just to really raise that vibration in the room while people are lying down. So I use it in that way as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love to, there is nothing more beautiful than getting a room full of people to chant Om, or
Mm,
the other kind of chants, but Om, like the classic and the most powerful in my view. And the resonance that happens, everyone starts off and you don't quite know where it's all going to go, and it might be a bit wonky to begin with.
yeah,
But it always finds that kind of purity, and I always end up with a massive grin on
yeah,
my face. But it's an interesting thing because, like, I've been teaching for decades, and I'm still slightly nervous about leading a beginner's class into doing that. So I've got a new
yeah,
class, and it's a really lovely, well attended, loads of people who they're all in my village, and they know each other, and so it's a very friendly, jolly class. But the idea of asking them all to chant, to sound, I'm slightly nervous about doing that. Not nervous, but reluctant to do that because I don't want to scare them.
yeah. So I had exactly that. Was just made me think. So when I first started teaching yoga per se, in 2018, I can remember a year or so in thinking, I really want to do an Om. I really want to, for them to get the benefit of the vibration in themselves and around the room, and how that all starts to connect in. And it took me a while of talking myself round to bring it into the class. And then eventually I did, and shared with them afterwards that was quite a big move for me. I
Yeah.
said, well, I might be doing this all the time now. But I think, yeah, the more we do it, the more we practice, and the more we believe in the practice, the easier it is for us to bring it to our participants. And with every, I always feel nervous bringing something new in, because I have the little self-doubt thing, or I think, oh God, is it going to be good enough? All of those little inner critic pops up. I like to call him my little imp on my shoulder. Um, and yeah, I think we just have to get through that first one, don't we? And then it starts to become second nature.
We do, we
And we
do. And I
trust,
think,
we trust that if the intention's there, they will get something. And
yeah,
I always do it as an invitation anyway, because I know people can feel quite self-conscious. So it's always an invitation, and people will always get something if they're not chanting by being around people that are chanting,
yes.
because they'll
But
feel
this
the
is
vibration.
but this is the gamble, isn't it? Where you got a room full of, let's say, for the sake of argument, a dozen people. Out of those dozen people, is there going to be somebody, and you think, cross your fingers that there will be, because you do your best and you sound out as clear and loud and pure and true as you can. But if everybody else is just going, and they're being really kind of scared and timid, and there's a room full of everybody going, "Ugh." But if you've got one person who's just going to go, yeah, I'm going to sing it out and go for it, then that gives permission. It's
Yeah.
just that beginning, yeah, got to get over
So I
that.
think if we can be that person, and also
Yes.
I've got you can, if you've got, I don't know if you ever work with sound, but if you've got a little speaker,
Mm,
sometimes you can find these beautiful ohms to chant along with lots of
yes.
voices, and that can be a really beautiful experience. So that's another way you could use
Yeah.
sound to help.
I like using my
Yeah.
little thingy bowl. I have a sounding bowl, one of those brass bowls, and
Yeah.
that's good because that sort of gives a lead, it gives a purpose. And yeah, no, it's an interesting one because because of the discipline that I've come through from the Iyengar school, like music was never really a part of it. Yes, chanting was. You do the invocation to Patanjali, but you wouldn't often chant Om. It would really only be that invocation that you would chant. But music was never a thing. And I know that there's so many yoga classes out there where it's just like a soundtrack, there's like constant movement throughout the
Yeah,
whole.
I mean, I think there's definitely, well, I mean, music wasn't part of my training either. It's just something I've brought into my practice for certain parts of it because it is a great access point, especially for people that perhaps do get a bit stuck in their heads and find it difficult, difficult to be able to get over that initial I'm going to
Yeah,
move. Music can be quite helpful and really good
yeah,
catalyst for people. Um, I do an online class where I have no music early in the morning. So, because I find first thing in the morning is quite nice just to be in the quiet and the still. I'm quite an early morning person. Um, so I really appreciate that time in the morning, having the
yeah,
stillness and the quiet and listening to the birds. So, not all my classes are like that, but it can be really useful.
yeah. No, do you know what I did use some music when I did my yoga retreat last year, for the evening sessions. So, have morning like active workshop session, and then the afternoon, evening, it would be, restorative, pranayama, meditation. And I would always have some music playing as people came into the room because it sets the tone. Otherwise,
Mm,
people can go, "Oh, what have you been doing? Have you been shopping?" Da, 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 da. They start yabbering. Whereas if you have that kind of music that's setting the atmosphere, they'll come in and they'll lie down, and then everything will be wonderful. Have you ever, so you put on events,
yeah.
which sound incredible. Have you ever thought of, or would you ever do a retreat? Because you've got so many things that you could do on a retreat.
Yeah, I've run a retreat with a friend who's an well, actually, I'm an open water swim coach as well. So we ran a swimming and yoga retreat a while back, and yeah, I've run like half-day retreats in Bristol near here, or just locally where people come in for like 3 or 4 hours and do a half-day retreat. But yeah, I definitely would run. Yeah, I would look at doing retreats elsewhere. Yeah, I'd quite like to go abroad, somewhere nice and warm.
Yeah.
But for the moment, I think we've got so many events and things coming up around this summer that yeah, I think retreats would be something I would do maybe later in the year. And working with people on immersion days. I mean, that's I have a coach and I go to her for an immersion day and night where I work with her all day. So that would be something I would do with my clients, my one-to-ones. So in a sort of sense, that's like a little mini retreat for
It
one
is, yeah.
person,
It
which
gets
is
so much.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
be amazing. God, well, we have talked about a lot of things. I'm hoping that we've really covered and got into the sort of the importance. Yeah, like we said before, it's daft to intellectualize this. Basically, the message is once you finish listening to this, go and find your favorite track, put it on,
Yeah,
and have a dance.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just get moving. Dance like no one's watching.
And what's your website? Remind everybody how they can get in
So
touch.
my website is www.momentsoflow.com, and I'm Sarah Fyson on Instagram. And yeah, so you can get hold of me those ways. You can sign up to my mail list, and then I send out newsletters. I love writing. So every now and again, I'll write a newsletter out to the people on my mail list and include all the events that we've got coming up and the one-to-one work that I do and the classes that I run. Yeah.
Okay.
So I do have an online class, which anyone, I've had people from Australia join that. I have a regular person who's in Ireland or France. So, there are ways that people can connect and come and
Yeah,
join in.
good old Zoom.
And it's
Beautiful.
half term, so my 9-year-old's just come downstairs for her breakfast. So we're juggling the whole thing here.
We
Work,
are,
kids.
and here am I sitting in a greenhouse trying to escape the building noise of my building site. So yes, life continues, but we continue
Exactly.
to do the work. We continue to,
Yeah. Yeah.
embrace what really matters, which is finding flow. Well, I'm wishing flow through everybody's day today. And thank you, Sarah, so much for joining me. It's been
Thank
absolutely
you.
brilliant.
Oh, I've loved it. Love chatting. Thanks, Roseanne.